The world is moving so fast right now. Day by day, we're seeing new models. The technology is improving so quickly. I genuinely believe that companies have a 12-month window to take big steps forward. Otherwise, the flywheel is going to kick off for their competitors and they're going to be behind. So now is the time to act.
Welcome to the Imagine AI Live podcast. I'm your host, Chris Madden, and today we have with us Tuhin Chakraborty, co-founder and CEO of Mimica AI. How are you doing, Tuhin?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
So happy to have you here. So I got a taste of what your company is the other day, but I want to let you, the CEO, explain it in your own words. What is Mimica AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mimic is a tool to instantly capture, map, and optimize your business processes. So essentially what we do is record people while they work on their computers. We anonymize all the data, and then we generate these really detailed insights and analytics about the way that people are working. So we can figure out how much time people are spending in different processes. We can find the inefficiencies, the bottlenecks, and the automation opportunities. And we can generate these really detailed process maps that contain all the steps and the logic in the process.
Wow. And so where are you as a company right now? Like, how long have you been founded and how big is the company today?
Yeah, so we started the company in 2018. My co-founder, Raphael, and I met at a startup accelerator, and Mimica was born out of this accelerator. Now we're about 150 people, which is super exciting. We've grown very significantly over the last year due to the latest advances in AI and large language models. We've seen massive growth, both from a revenue and a headcount perspective.
That's incredible. So 2018, what was the startup incubator?
It's called Entrepreneur First, which is a startup accelerator in London. And it's a very unique accelerator because they fund you while you're trying to start a company, even before you have an idea. So we didn't initially know what we were working on. Raphael and I met, we conceived of this idea together. We were being funded the entire time. And after 12 weeks, we got an initial round of funding from this accelerator to go and pursue the business long term.
I imagine that the company has changed a bit. Has it always been that same, mission from 2018, or has it evolved?
So our mission at the inception of the company was to build AI that could learn to automate repetitive work that people do on their computers. So the idea is if you watch someone pay an invoice 50 times, you can observe how that invoice gets paid. You can observe all the steps and the logic in the process, and you could generate an agent that can automatically do that work. So that was the initial vision of the company. And what we realized is if we were going to build this technology, we were going to need to be able to understand what people do on their computers. So watching, observing, learning, and using that workflow to power the agent. So today we're very focused on the learning aspect of it, which is why we do the analytics. But in the future, we still plan to generate agents that are capable of autonomously executing the work using the workflows that we've inferred from the recordings.
Okay, so with that, you've explained a bit of how Mimica does work. Today, your front of the line product that you have today, how does it work? Explain to us how Mimica works.
So essentially, we deploy a recorder, which is a desktop agent that captures every input into the computer. So clicks, keystrokes, and we also capture screenshot data. So as you're working on your computer, we can see the software that you're interacting with, the fields that you're interacting with, the data that's being typed into the fields. Now, of course, we anonymize all the data, so there's absolutely no confidential or personally identifiable information that's persisted by the tool. But if you think about this data, it's essentially sequence data. So we see these sequences of clicks, keystrokes, and screenshots, and then we're training machine learning models that are doing statistical pattern mining on this data in order to make predictions about what are the tasks and processes and what do those process maps actually look like.
Can you give us an example of how this Mimica's helped an enterprise?
Absolutely. So is one of our biggest customers, and they use Mimica to establish productivity benchmarks in their claims process. So they have 4,000 claims agents that are doing auto claims. And essentially, the way that they use Mimica is they're trying to understand all of the different activities that occur within the claims process. So, you have adjusters, you have people reviewing documents, you have outreach to the customer to try to get information from them. There are many different activities that are performed in the overall execution of this claims process. And they use Mimica to identify what those activities are, which, by the way, might be a little bit surprising. You would think that these processes are very well defined, but actually what we find is that enterprises don't really understand how the time in the process is being spent. So again, using Mimica to identify what are the activities in the claims process and how automatable are those activities. And we can generate these business process maps that show all of the steps involved in executing the claim.
Could you give us another example? Like, what real world results have organizations achieved with Mimica?
Yeah, absolutely. So was able to cut the time in their claims process by 20%, which is an astounding number if you think about it, because they have 4,000 claims agents that are constantly working on these claims. And one of the key initiatives that they have in the organization is to process claims faster. So 20% reduction has huge impact on their business. And the way that they're able to achieve this is they're able to find all of these inefficiencies and bottlenecks in the process that they were not able to find before. So, for example, claims that involve a tow were actually taking 50% longer than the average. Now, they had no way of measuring that before. They had no way of measuring claims that require a tow versus regular claims. And so there's a very famous quote: if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So for the first time, Mimic is creating a way to measure all of these nuances in digital work so you can find those inefficiencies and bottlenecks and make them more efficient.
So it's very interesting. So, and is this mostly done through people on their computers, right? That's where the recording's happening. And so the screen's being recorded, the audio's being recorded as well?
No, we don't record audio today. So it's only the inputs into the computer. So clicks, keystrokes, screenshots, and of course the anonymization.
Mm-hmm. So this typically could work for remote companies as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as operations become more remote, there's an increasing interest from enterprises in understanding how people are working on their computers. But that's not, I would say, a typical use case for us. Um, Mimica has applicability in all sorts of business units. So the example that I gave is very typical for the insurance industry, but every company has a finance department, and finance is one of the most common use cases for us. So things like accounts payable, accounts receivable, month-end close, FP&A, all of these are repetitive, high volume processes that the enterprise is executing. And that's just in the finance department. You also have use cases in customer support, shared services, IT, operations. All these different business units in these large enterprises have high volume, repetitive processes.
So what is the report that the company gets then once you've figured out, you kind of mapped out the processes of an enterprise and you figured out where there's some bottlenecks and some inefficiencies? What report do they then get from you?
So there are two key outputs out of Mimica. One is a list of all the tasks and processes that a given team or department is doing. Now, it might not sound like much, but a lot of times these organizations are paying McKinsey and other consulting companies millions and millions of dollars to come in and interview everybody that's doing this work. They're going to do whiteboarding, they're going to do manual process mapping and try to come up with these lists. The challenge is that these lists are being created using anecdotal evidence. So you're relying on people's stories and narratives about how they work in order to make predictions about how the time is being spent. What Mimica does is we go to the source of truth, which is the process and the data itself. And the first output, as I was saying, is a list of all the tasks and processes. And we measure for each one how automatable it is, what the average handle time is, which is a key metric for people in transformation, and really figuring out what is the ROI if you were to embark on a transformation or automation initiative for that particular task. And then from there, we can generate a business process map that contains all the variations and steps and exceptions in the process. This process map, our customers tell us, can sometimes take months to produce manually. And all of these outputs we can produce within Mimica in a matter of days.
Wow. And so you've got this huge list. Do you give suggestions on then how to make the process faster?
Absolutely. So once we identify what the tasks and processes are, we generate the process map. We're also predicting what is the appropriate transformation on a given process. So the customers that use Mimica, they're typically focused on 4 different types of transformations: eliminate, simplify, standardize, and automate. Now, you want to do all 3 of those first steps first before you try to automate something. So, if a process can be eliminated or there are steps in the process that can be eliminated, you want to do that first. Second, you want to simplify the process. So, if there are any approvals or steps that don't need to be there or can be reconfigured, those are actions that you want to take first. You want to standardize the process. So many of our customers are multinational organizations, same process happening differently on different teams or different regions. So you want to get everybody rowing in the same direction so that you can deploy a single automation that's going to automate all the work. And that is the last and final step, is to automate. Now, if the recommendation is automation, Mimica can tell you what is the appropriate technology that you should use to automate that process. That could be RPA, OCR, IDP, Gen AI. So RPA, robotic process automation. So some of the key vendors in this space are UiPath, Automation Anywhere. This is your old school vanilla automation where you're building these software robots that are essentially interacting with the computer the same way a human does. And it's very funny to watch them work because they'll open up the browser and they'll scroll the page and they'll type data into fields. And it's an old school way of automating things, but the strength of it is that it can connect all these disparate systems together that where you don't have API integrations. So RPA, OCR, if you have unstructured data in a process, you may want to extract the text using OCR, or IDP is another technology that you can use to go from unstructured or semi-structured invoices or order forms into a tabular structure. And then finally, Gen AI, which everybody is extremely excited about. Everybody's looking for opportunities to bring Gen AI into the business. So Mimica can record your entire department and identify every Gen AI automation opportunity. And as a matter of fact, very soon we plan to deploy our own agents, which are capable of interacting with unstructured data and executing business processes autonomously.
Nice. So I wanted to ask about that because it sounds like, okay, so you give these companies a menu of other software and tools they can use to help their business and their processes, but you're developing your own AI agents. Tell us about that.
Well, it's the right tool for the right job. So we want to assess what is the best tool to automate the process. And if that's not something that we're experts in, we will gladly get you to the right individual or the right tool that can help you automate that process. Now, what we see is in the enterprise, there is a lot of automation opportunity that cannot currently be automated using these existing automation tools. There might be a couple of steps, 2 or 3 critical steps in the process where a slightly more advanced form of automation is required to actually get that automation into production. And that's where the Gen AI technology is really powerful. It's capable of dealing with semi-structured and unstructured data and also writing as well as reading that data. And that's why we want to deploy our own agent, because we see a gap in the market today where the only way to actually automate these processes is to use this old automation technology, which is very manual and painful to deploy. The cool thing about Mimica is you'll be able to deploy it at the click of a button. So we already know the process, which we've learned by watching your employees. Maybe you can make some small modifications to it, but essentially at the click of a button, you'll be able to deploy an agent that will sit right alongside the human and execute that process autonomously.
Amazing. Do you have a roadmap for when those AI agents will be available?
We've already built the agent actually, and we've got some customers testing it right now. So we expect that to be revenue generating by the end of this year. And what's really cool about that is actually the original mission of the company. We built all this analytics technology in service of the agent. And along the way, customers told us that the analytics themselves were extremely valuable. So we put a ribbon around that product and started selling it. And the demand has been off the charts just for the analytics piece, but it wasn't our original intent. So the deployment of the agent is really exciting for my co-founder Raphael and I, because it feels like the mission that we set out to accomplish in 2018 is finally coming to fruition.
That's amazing, Tuhin. And so 2018 is when you launched this with your co-founder. Let's go back deeper, and maybe I love asking people like, how would you describe your origin story?
Yeah, so I have to give credit to my co-founder Raphael because he had a background in neuroscience, and there's this idea in neuroscience called predictive coding. And predictive coding suggests that the brain is constantly trying to predict the environment around it. So one example of this is if you don't cut your hair for a while and then you cut your hair and you run your fingers through your hair, you'll feel like something is missing. You notice the absence of the thing. And this is because the brain is constantly trying to predict what to expect. And when something is different or something is missing, it recognizes that. And that was the initial seed of the idea for Mimica. And what Raf conceived of in the early days is, what if there was a technology that could predict the next action that you were going to take on your computer? So looking at the clicks and keystrokes and trying to predict the next action, that became the seed of Mimica. We were going to mimic what people do on their computers by recording the process and generating an automation.
That's a great company origin story. Did you meet Raphael at the incubator?
I did, yes. So the incubator is very interesting because the way the program works is they give you a monthly stipend and they observe the progress of the business over time. And if at any point the business is not progressing to their liking, they cut your funding and you have to go home. So I went to London on a whim. I was founder dating in San Francisco, and I got the opportunity to join this accelerator. I was already looking to start a business. And so within 2 weeks, I was in London getting paid £2,000 a month. No idea what to work on, just me in a room with 100 other wannabe entrepreneurs, essentially. Many of them had PhD backgrounds. I did not. My background was more in software. But Raphael and I began working together. And I'm happy to say that we didn't get cut from the program, even though about 90% of the people that did the program did get cut. But we survived, and that's how Mimica was born.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that the dating process went well for with Raphael. I love that idea of that co or founder dating in San Francisco. So, where does your drive for entrepreneurship come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have wanted to be a tech entrepreneur since I was a kid. I was born in the Bay Area in California, so I'm certainly a product of my environment in many ways. I had a pivotal moment when I was quite young. Um, I think it was 1998. So I was about 9 years old at the time. And Sabir Bhatia, who was an Indian entrepreneur, sold Hotmail to Microsoft. And it was a big moment in the Indian community. And my mom actually pointed to him as someone that I could aspire to. So she said something like, if you work really hard, you could be like Sabir one day. And from a young age, that was my paragon of excellence in many ways, was being a successful entrepreneur. So I wanted to be a tech entrepreneur for a long time. And a lot of my years as a kid, I would spend coming up with startup ideas, figuring out technologies to build, figuring out how to market them, eventually learning how to write code and create those ideas from scratch. And that led me many, many years later down the path that I'm on today.
That's so cool. From childhood dreams to now running a company with 150 employees. Congrats on making it that far. Your TAM seems pretty big here. Can you explain the roadmap of some future obstacles or future goalposts that you have for your company?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the TAM is one of the things that really excites me most about Mimica. I had a startup before this, which was a sales automation tool. It was trying to automate outbound personalized messaging, something that has been easily done by ChatGPT today, but at the time it was a very novel concept. And I didn't succeed. And I ended up building this analytics tool, gave insights into prospects. And it was a powerful technology, and I had some success with it. But what struck me about that tool was that it never had the potential to be a really big company. It was perfect for me at the time, nights and weekends project. I used the money that I made from that business to pay off the last of my college debt. But with Mimica, it's in the DNA to become one of the largest companies in the world. And I'm not saying that it will. There's a lot of execution that has to go correctly between now and then for that to happen. But the fact that it has that potential is tremendously exciting for me. And it's definitely something that energizes me when I come to work every day. Now, what we have to do immediately is two things. One, we have to scale the analytics tool. And the way that we're going to do that is by bringing down the price, because there's a lot of latent demand for this technology across the enterprise. But the price point right now is a little bit too high in the sense that people are using it sparingly. Once we can get the price down a little bit more, people will deploy this technology everywhere. I believe that every workplace computer will be running task mining technology on it in the next 5 years. Now, that technology is the foundational layer upon which the agents will be deployed in the future. So if you think of all the digital work in the enterprise happening as the first layer, then task mining as the analytics layer that sits on top of that, and the agent is going to be another layer that sits on top of the analytics. So once we can establish the analytics layer as a horizontal layer that sits across all digital work, we will be well positioned to then deploy the agents that can automate that work. So those are the two key axes of development. One is to scale the analytics piece, and two is to deploy the agents. So those are the two big milestones. Now, of course, we have revenue milestones and metrics associated with that, but those are the two really big picture items. And if we can do those two things, there's no doubt in my mind that Mimica will become a generational company.
Yeah, it's really inspiring. And I mean, just in my media organization, I mean, there are so many tasks and it takes a lot to get a piece of content out the door actually. And to be able to, visually map that and just see it logically laid out the whole process. And then with my very remote team as well, seems like a very valuable thing. And then yeah, I'm sure that the price point for an enterprise one is quite high, but being able to bring the price down where more people can use it too. So everybody's talking about AI. It's obvious now that it's hitting almost every vertical. It's going to impact everybody's life. And how do you see the role of AI evolving in enterprise?
Well, we're very early right now in terms of enterprise adoption of AI. What we are seeing today is, we're barely scratching the surface of what's possible. I believe that every job that's being done in the enterprise will be heavily impacted by AI. And I see that as a really positive thing. Now, the difference from my perspective, the difference between fear and excitement around AI is really around whether you see it as something that's within your control or not within your control. So if your autonomy is being taken away from you by AI, that's when you get a fear response. But if you're in control of the technology and you're using it to supercharge what you're trying to do today, and you have the agency to control how the technology is implemented and used, then it's quite energizing. And I think that's the framework that people should have, is not feeling like they're losing part of themselves to AI, but really thinking about how they can take advantage of this technology in order to execute their role better. There's no doubt in my mind that the amount of work that humans will be able to accomplish in the enterprise, and you can measure this with a metric like average revenue per employee, right? Very common metric that companies use to measure the sort of dollar efficiency. That metric is going to skyrocket, and AI is going to be a heavy player in every function.
Yeah, I think you described it very, very well there. That fear versus excitement. So I try to tell people, because I know there's still so many people that don't actually use ChatGPT every day, or like use it to ask questions and like try to help improve their lives and figure out how to do more at work and figure out, start a side project, things like that. And certainly in the enterprise too, a lot of employees are probably sitting there like worried about AI, but like, hey, start opening up and using these tools and you'll see that you can do a lot more. And then you can't stick your head in the sand, and you got to use AI to see how you can supercharge your life. And then that it gets really exciting.
And I use OpenAI, ChatGPT. I mean, I use it for everything. Constantly using it to do research, make decisions, handle difficult conversations, brainstorm ideas. I mean, I'm in that thing all day, every day.
You just made me think of my co-founder, Steve Metcalf, who is leading our conference, and he's literally a one-man wrecking crew with AI. He's doing it all himself and with AI and like people's feedback. But he just launched this whole Meta campaign in less than a day, just talking. It's never used, never did an ad on Meta, and he just figured it out with AI and built these like really cool like designs and to get out there to people. It's and really enticing, and it's crazy how much people can do now if they sit down and ask and use AI. And it's incredible times. So Tuhin, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I think your company sounds incredibly cool and valuable. Do you have a message for maybe an enterprise that's not using task mining technology today?
Yeah, I have a message for anybody that's doing any manual process mapping or manual understanding of your processes. And I'm here to tell you that there is a better way. You don't have to rely on anecdotes of how people are working. You don't have to rely on their stories, their narratives, and manual process mapping techniques. Right now, with the advent of AI, we've seen that at the click of a button, you can identify every process improvement and automation opportunity in your business. And you can get a roadmap for how to implement that transformation. And not just that, you can get it in a matter of days. So this is the future of how we're understanding and optimizing digital work. And if you haven't seen this technology before, I highly encourage you to reach out to Mimica. One of our team would be happy to show you what we've got.
And just to build on that, I mean, just thinking about that, because business is such a competitive field, businesses that aren't doing this stuff are going to be really, trailing behind. And the ones that jump on it early, or the earlier the better, to figure out their process and the inefficiencies to help make them more efficient and do more. It's such a critical thing to be able to use this cutting edge technology. Truly.
So critical. And the world is moving so fast right now. Day by day, we're seeing new models. The technology is improving so quickly. I genuinely believe that companies have a 12-month window to take big steps forward. Otherwise, the flywheel is going to kick off for their competitors, and they're going to be behind. So now is the time to act.
Wow. Yeah. Well said. And it's a good room for a plug for our Imagine AI Live conference that's coming up in 2 months here. And it's going to be a 3-day event. And we've got a cross industry thing. We're going to have tons of great speakers there. We hope to have you there too, maybe Tuhin. It's a great place for any business owner that's not really confident in where AI is today to come and just get like a state of the cutting edge of where AI is and how to apply it to their business. So that's May 28th to 30th in Las Vegas at the Fontainebleau. Tickets are available online now. Well, Tuhin, this has been an amazing conversation. Thanks so much for joining. And you can find, like he said, Tuhin Chakraborty on LinkedIn or Mimica AI, mimica.ai, right?
Yep, mimica.ai. Come check us out. Thank you so much for having me, Chris. And we'll see you on stage in Vegas.